Hello from London, and here I am today with another interlocution from Jesus, and today it's on a very good topic. It's called fear, and how fear blocks us and blocks the life of the church. So here goes. My children, today I want to talk to you about the greatest enemy to your souls, to the church and to evangelization, fear. My children, perfect love casts out all fear, and just as Peter walked on the water as he followed me, I desire you too to walk on the waters of fear in your lives. Fear, my children, is like a swamp of thick mud that neither wants you to go backwards or forwards, but wants you to remain stuck. Imagine a mountain climber who became gripped with fear halfway up the mountain. They would neither be able to go up or to go down and would simply be paralyzed. This, my children, is what Satan desires to do to you and to my church. He desires to fill you with so much fear that you will be afraid to move forwards in your lives, and you will be afraid of my church moving forwards. Instead, you will desire things to remain as they are and so become stuck. My children, I am a God who has no fear, and I call my followers to being filled with my fearless love. How will you be able to go out and to witness my love to others if you are afraid of them or what may happen? My children, my ways are not your ways, and my logic is not your logic. You must not limit me to your ways of thinking and to your limits, for by doing so, you deny my power and you limit and block the power of the Holy Spirit in both your own lives and the life of the church. Again, I say to you, read the lives of the saints and open your hearts and minds to the supernatural. Well, what a beautiful message. In a way, what an obvious, simple message. Nothing really spectacular about it in some ways. On the other hand, so challenging. We all know, for example, if we're full of fear, we won't be able to do evangelization. We all know if we're full of fear, we're not going to step out in faith. It's common sense, and yet it's something that can grip and affect us all. And see, Jesus goes on and he says the example there of, look at St. Peter who walked on the water and he followed him. And Jesus desires that we too will walk on the waters of fear in our lives. Now that doesn't mean that Jesus is asking me or you today to go to the nearest river and to walk on the water. But it does mean he's asking us to be docile to the Holy Spirit. And I often think, for example, of the example of St. Peter. You see, Jesus invited Peter out, but Jesus didn't invite the other apostles out. So Peter was given this special grace, if you like, and special request to walk out on the water. Now imagine if the other apostles walked out with Peter. Well, they weren't asked, so of course they would have sunk. Imagine then halfway through, of course, Peter walks out, he gets nervous, and so he begins to sink. And because he got nervous, you see, he zoned out, if you like, or he plugged himself out. It's like plugging out your phone. He plugged himself out of God power, and basically he was powerless. But you can imagine afterwards, for argument's sake, imagine if Peter got back into the boat and maybe his mother had been watching. Imagine what she might say. Keep away from that Jesus fella, he's very, very dangerous. Why did he ask you out in the water? He didn't ask anybody else. You nearly drowned yourself. Keep away from him. Oh, no, this is a bad guy. You can serve the church, you can do all sorts of good things in the church by staying in the land. You can become a scribe or a Pharisee or something like that. Do a bit of studying, whatever. Be a good man, be a good fisherman. And don't mind all this stuff. This Jesus fella, he's bad news, he's dangerous, he's unconventional. We don't know what sort of trouble he's going to get you in. And it's not good. Now, of course, she didn't say that. But yet, in an awful lot of cases, that's what our little inner voice says. Our little inner voice says, well, I could serve Jesus in another way, in my case, without living on Providence. Or I could serve Jesus another way without helping LGBT people. I mean, I could help the poor people. Or I could help Jesus without doing evangelization, without going into Soho, without stepping out in faith. I could serve Jesus without saying that in my talk or without saying that in my sermon if I'm a priest. Or I could serve Jesus in these other ways. And you see, this is where often we block the action of the Holy Spirit, because the Holy Spirit wants us to do his will, and the Holy Spirit is a supernatural Holy Spirit. So then he uses the example of the mountain climber and the swamp. So first of all, he says fear is like a thick mud that neither wants you to go backwards or forwards, And it's a bit like being a mountain climber and being halfway up the mountain and being afraid to move up because you're afraid of heights, and being afraid to go down because you're afraid of the height that you're up already. It's a bit like we see at times on the television, or sometimes you hear about a cat that climbs up a tree and then they can't get down. Why? Because fear got them. And so Jesus is saying the same thing when it comes to the church. Sometimes there can be so many changes that we're afraid of the Senate coming up. We're afraid of maybe what will happen. We're afraid of letting LGBT people in. We're afraid of the Holy Spirit. We're afraid of this. We're afraid of that. On the other hand, maybe we're afraid to go back to the way that things were because people won't like that and they'll be complaining as well. So what then? We just maybe want to keep things safe, keep things the way they are. And this house Satan, he wants to destroy both us and both the church. And he wants us to fill us with so much fear that we'll be afraid to do anything, basically. And then Jesus goes on to say that he, Jesus, is a God that has no fear, and that he wants his followers to be filled with a fearless love. So what does that mean then? That he's going to take away all our fears? Well, no. It means that he wants to give us a grace to overcome them. And I remember, for example, one example was when I was in France. This was years ago. And I only had €50 left in my pocket. And I figured with €50 I had enough to get a train and to get away from the place I was in, and especially the religious community where I was at the time. And I was praying to Jesus saying, well, what should I do? Should I get away, or is this running away, or what's the answer? So I was in the cathedral in Toulon, in the south of France. And all of a sudden, as I was praying, I saw this £50 or €50 it was, floating out of my pocket and into the donation box. My first reaction was, oh my goodness, you must be kidding. But then I said, well, Jesus, if this is you, if this is the Holy Spirit, please convict me. Please do this again and again, because one can be tricked as well. And it kept happening, it kept happening. And so eventually I knew that God was asking me to surrender, to put that €50, which represented all the ways I was going to escape my will, into the box and to trust him. So I put the €50 into the box, felt this enormous peace. Immediately afterwards, my uncle rang me and I told him what I did. Oh, you fool, why did you do that? And you've got no bank cards. Oh, that was a terrible, stupid thing to do. And I'm sort of thinking, well, no, it wasn't, but that's a terrible, stupid thing to say because you don't know me and you don't know what's just happened. Anyway, long story short, then I felt the Holy Spirit telling me, go and talk to the priest, go and talk to the person in charge of the community where you're having difficulties, explain to them what's happening, explain to them where you're at. So I did that. It went really, really well. We had a reconciliation, or whatever problem was resolved. And then a couple of days later, I was awarded over €2,000 from the French government, something to do with social welfare benefits or something like that. Money that everyone said I would never, ever, ever get. So you see, that is an example of walking in faith, in trusting in the ways of the Holy Spirit. But if I had been following human thinking, and no offense to my uncle, he's a great man in many ways, but he never could understand that part. If I was, following human thinking, it would have been keep that £50, take a train, do this, do that, human planning. And so basically we can plan our own destruction is basically what Jesus is saying. And so he's saying, do not limit me to your ways of thinking and to your ways of doing, because by doing that you can deny both his power and you can block the Holy Spirit to act in his life or in our own lives and the life of the church. Similarly, if you're afraid to go out and pray, if you're afraid to help people, imagine all the people that could be helped through your prayers and that you're blocking. And so fear gets us nowhere. On the other hand, of course, it is important to discern. And I will put in another story. A friend of mine, I won't say his name, but in Australia, and he had just met Jesus. He was reading the Bible and he wanted to show Jesus how much he trusted him. So he decided that he was going to jump off a 3-story building. It was a car park. And he decided, in innocence, he was only 19, that the angels would catch him because that's how much he trusted Jesus and he wanted to show to Jesus his trust. It was very, very innocent. At the same time, the angels didn't catch him and he ended up with a broken back. So that is where it is very, very, very important to discern. But discerning does not mean fear. Discerning does not mean playing it safe. Discerning just means being attentive to the Holy Spirit, getting to know the Holy Spirit. And when the Holy Spirit says to do something, we're doing it, regardless of how mad it sounds, but being sure. And finally, Jesus said to read and reread the lives of the saints, because the saints' lives are full of supernatural experiences, supernatural blessings, and through reading them, we will get inspired to realize it's the same Holy Spirit and that He's asking us in this day and age to follow Him and to do similar miracles and to live similarly. So on that note, have no fear, be full of love, go out there, praise Jesus, heal, deliver people.